Living a happy life and finding real, lasting happiness, these are dreams we all share, but they often feel just out of reach. How can we truly be happy, free from the weight of the past or the uncertainty of the future? The Japanese bestseller, The Courage to be Disliked, offers a powerful answer rooted in an idea that may surprise you, that happiness is not something we chase, it's something we can choose. This book has captivated millions, selling over 3.5 million copies, and for good reason. Written by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumite Koga, the book draws on the profound teachings of Alfred Adler, a philosopher and psychologist who believed we all have the potential to live deeply satisfying lives. His teachings go against much of what we're conditioned to believe about happiness. Instead of focusing on achieving success, gaining approval, or even on healing every past hurt, Adler's philosophy guides us to let go of the burdens that we allow to define us. Imagine a life where you aren't held back by regrets or anxieties. Imagine finding joy and purpose just in being who you are, here and now. The Courage to be Disliked is a powerful, thought-provoking book that unfolds over 5 nights of deep, meaningful conversations between a young man, full of questions, and a wise philosopher. The philosopher's ideas are based on the influential teachings of Alfred Adler, a psychologist whose work focused on the belief that all of life's problems stem from issues within our interpersonal relationships. According to Adler, happiness is built upon 2 essential principles: accepting ourselves fully and extending that acceptance to others. In the book, the young man seeks answers to his questions about life, happiness, and purpose. Each night, the philosopher introduces him to a new piece of Adlerian thought, gradually guiding him to a clearer understanding of what it means to lead a fulfilling life. It's not about perfection or popularity, but rather about courage, the courage to embrace ourselves, even if it means standing out or being misunderstood. The section that left the deepest impact on you was the 3rd night, titled The Separation of Tasks. This idea is one of the book's most liberating concepts. Adler proposes that many of our struggles come from taking on others' responsibilities as our own, or feeling overly responsible for how others perceive us. Through the separation of tasks, we're encouraged to draw clear boundaries between what's within our control and what isn't. We're reminded that our own actions and attitudes are ours to manage, while how others react, think, or feel lies beyond our control. This concept urges us to focus on living our own lives authentically, freeing ourselves from the exhausting burden of trying to manage or fix the thoughts and opinions of others. Even if some aspects of Adler's philosophy may feel challenging or don't resonate completely, the book still offers rich perspectives on self-acceptance, courage, and human connection. By recognizing the central role of our relationships, The Courage to be Disliked opens up a pathway to personal peace and clarity, making it a worthwhile read for anyone on a journey toward understanding themselves and finding happiness. The first night of The Courage to be Disliked delves into one of Adler's most provocative claims: deny trauma. This idea might sound jarring at first. We typically think of trauma as a powerful, often life-altering experience, and it's widely accepted that traumatic events can shape a person's future. However, Adlerian psychology presents a unique and controversial perspective on this, challenging the notion that our past must dictate our present or future. Adler's position is this: no experience itself inherently determines our success, failure, or happiness. Instead, he argues, it is our interpretation and the meaning we assign to these experiences that influence us. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead, we make out of them whatever suits our purposes. In other words, Adler suggests that while painful, traumatic events do happen, they are not inherently deterministic. Our future actions and feelings are not dictated by these events. Rather, it is our chosen response to these memories that shapes our lives. This philosophy can be difficult to accept, especially for those who have endured significant trauma. For many, experiences of fear, loss, and betrayal can feel inescapably ingrained. To suggest that one has the choice not to be defined by these events may seem dismissive. However, Adler is not denying the existence or intensity of trauma itself. Instead, he proposes that the power lies in our interpretation and response. His belief is that we can, if we choose, assign a new meaning to even the most painful events, finding ways to move forward rather than remain trapped by the past. In the conversation, the young man challenges the philosopher with an example of his friend who suffers from debilitating fear and anxiety about leaving the house. This friend had a traumatic experience with his parents in childhood, which he believes to be the root of his anxiety. To most, it would seem natural to assume that this past experience has directly caused his current fears. But Adler's perspective, as explained by the philosopher, suggests that this young man has unconsciously set a goal, the goal of not leaving the house. According to Adler, this goal has prompted him to create the feelings of fear and anxiety as reasons to stay inside, thus reinforcing his desire to avoid the outside world. Rather than viewing the trauma as a permanent restriction on his freedom, Adlerian psychology suggests that he has agency in reframing his relationship with the past and finding new meaning in it. In Adler's view, the choice to stay inside is not imposed by the trauma itself but is a choice he's making, even if unconsciously, in the present. To be clear, this perspective doesn't trivialize trauma or ignore its impacts. Rather, it reframes the power dynamics, encouraging individuals to realize that, although they cannot change the past, they do have the power to reshape its impact on their present lives. This approach can empower people to reframe and take responsibility for the stories they tell themselves about their past, rather than seeing themselves as prisoners of events they could not control. This idea can certainly be a tough pill to swallow. For some, it may feel too harsh, especially if past trauma feels overpowering. However, Adler's philosophy offers an invitation to see oneself not as a passive victim of circumstance, but as an active author of one's life. The courage to embrace this view, to see oneself as capable of assigning new meanings and setting new goals, is what Adler believes to be at the heart of true happiness and freedom. On the second night of the courage to be disliked, the young man returns to the philosopher with a vulnerable confession: he dislikes himself. This moment is one of the book's most powerful because it strikes at the core of a common struggle. Many of us know what it's like to be dissatisfied with who we are, carrying a harsh self-view that fixates on flaws, weaknesses, and regrets. The philosopher responds by introducing one of Adler's fundamental beliefs: all problems are interpersonal relationship problems. In Adler's view, every struggle we face, even our issues with self-esteem, ultimately links back to our relationships with others. This might seem surprising at first. After all, how can disliking oneself be a relationship problem? According to Adler, the way we perceive ourselves is strongly shaped by how we believe others see us. When we decide we don't like ourselves, it's often because we're measuring ourselves against expectations, opinions, or comparisons that originate outside of us. We start to notice every shortcoming and fall into the trap of self-fulfilling prophecies, defining ourselves through a negative lens and reinforcing it with each flaw we observe. The more we think we're not good enough, the more we tend to focus only on evidence that supports that belief. Adler's philosophy encourages us to question this self-critical viewpoint. The philosopher suggests that our self-dislike isn't an objective reality, it's something we've created by choosing to focus on our weaknesses rather than strengths. This choice becomes the foundation for how we see ourselves, and it's one that we reinforce every day, consciously or unconsciously. Imagine a person who is constantly focused on their perceived inadequacies. They might think, I'm not smart enough, I'm not attractive enough, or I'm always making mistakes. These beliefs start to form a story that they tell themselves about who they are, and as they continue to look only for evidence that confirms this story, it becomes their reality. The philosopher points out that by shifting focus, by choosing to see ourselves as capable, worthy, and deserving of kindness, we can begin to rewrite our self-narrative. Adler's approach invites us to see self-acceptance as a choice we make in the context of our relationships with others. Instead of measuring ourselves by how we think others perceive us or by how we think we should be, he suggests we learn to accept ourselves as we are and others as they are. This acceptance allows us to free ourselves from the constant cycle of comparison and criticism. We stop striving to meet impossible standards and instead begin to feel content within ourselves. It's a courageous shift. To stop criticizing ourselves and to embrace our imperfections requires a willingness to change the stories we've long believed about ourselves. It's not about ignoring our flaws or pretending they don't exist, it's about understanding that these flaws do not define our worth. We're allowed to have weaknesses without letting them dictate our entire self-image. Adler's philosophy suggests that real freedom and happiness come from within when we stop seeking validation externally. If we can release our grip on the need to be perfect or meet others' expectations, we can begin to appreciate ourselves in a new way, one that isn't limited by our self-imposed insecurities. Ultimately, this night's conversation serves as a gentle, yet profound reminder: if we want to live a happy life, we must first build a compassionate relationship with ourselves. Only then can we form meaningful, healthy connections with others. By learning to see ourselves through a kinder, more understanding lens, we break free from the bonds of self-dislike, moving one step closer to a life of fulfillment and genuine self-acceptance. Adler's philosophy presents a compelling idea, that every problem we face can be traced back to our relationships with others. To truly escape all interpersonal conflicts, we'd have to live in complete isolation, an impossible scenario in a world built on human connection. Adler suggests that loneliness isn't just the experience of being alone, it's the painful feeling of being excluded from the people and communities around us. In this sense, loneliness is less about physical solitude and more about a perceived disconnect from the fabric of human society. Adler proposes that our very existence depends on others. From the moment we're born, we rely on caregivers for survival, guidance, and learning. As we grow, our sense of self, purpose, and identity are deeply intertwined with the social bonds we form. Even our ambitions, values, and perceptions are shaped through interactions, feedback, and shared experiences. It's nearly impossible to separate ourselves from others because we inherently see ourselves through the eyes of the people around us. Because of this, Adler views all personal struggles, self-esteem issues, dissatisfaction, anger, jealousy, as fundamentally linked to our relationships. The moments we feel small or inadequate often stem from comparisons to others, or from feeling we're not meeting societal expectations. When we feel rejected, it's not simply that someone didn't agree with us, it's that we interpret their disagreement as a sign we're somehow unworthy of connection or respect. Adler challenges us to reframe how we approach these interactions. If we start seeing conflicts, not as absolute truths about ourselves or others, but as areas for growth and understanding, we take back control of how we relate to people. This philosophy doesn't mean we'll never encounter disagreements or misunderstandings, but rather, we can choose not to let them define our self-worth or happiness. For Adler, the path to a fulfilling life isn't about isolating ourselves to avoid relational pain. Instead, it's about embracing the reality that human connection is both beautiful and challenging. By striving to foster healthy, authentic relationships with others and learning to see ourselves through a compassionate lens, we can navigate the complexities of interpersonal relationships with greater resilience and satisfaction. In short, Adler's approach teaches us that real strength lies not in avoiding the difficulties of relationships but in embracing them as opportunities to grow, learn, and connect. The journey toward happiness, then, isn't about isolation, it's about redefining our relationships with others and with ourselves in a way that supports inner peace, confidence, and genuine connection. The third night in The Courage to be Disliked centers on one of the book's most profound and liberating messages: discard other people's tasks. This idea taps into a universal struggle, the desire to be liked, admired, and accepted by others. Adlerian psychology teaches us that this need for approval is one of the greatest barriers to living a truly happy and authentic life. Many of us go through life hoping to earn the love, respect, and validation of those around us. But according to Adler, this pursuit leads us away from ourselves and traps us in a cycle of external expectations. The philosopher explains to the young man that if we base our self-worth on others' opinions, we end up living for everyone but ourselves. When we're focused on being liked, we're constantly molding our actions, words, and even beliefs to fit what we think others want to see. This is what Adler calls living to satisfy the expectations of others. It's as if we hand over the reins of our lives to others, letting them dictate who we should be and how we should live. This is where discarding other people's tasks comes in. Adler teaches that each of us has our own tasks in life, our own responsibilities and choices that we alone must navigate. For instance, your feelings, beliefs, and values are your tasks, while other people's opinions, judgments, and expectations are theirs. By trying to control how others see us or by changing ourselves to meet their expectations, we're essentially taking on their tasks instead of focusing on our own. This doesn't mean that Adler encourages indifference or selfishness. Rather, he urges us to recognize where our responsibilities end and others begin. For example, if someone disapproves of you or disagrees with your choices, that's their response, their task, not yours. Your task is to live in alignment with your values and pursue a life that feels meaningful to you. Adler's philosophy isn't about rejecting all relationships or avoiding consideration of others' feelings. It's about understanding that you are not obligated to meet every expectation others place on you. When we discard this need for external validation, we gain freedom, the freedom to live as we truly are, without the constant weight of others' opinions. This is what Adler calls the courage to be disliked, the courage to live with authenticity, even if it means some people won't approve. Living with this courage can feel like an enormous challenge. It may feel like we're risking our relationships, social standing, or even our self-worth. But Adler believes that only by relinquishing this need to be universally liked can we actually find true connection. Paradoxically, when we stop trying to be everything to everyone, we begin to attract people who appreciate us for who we genuinely are. In turn, we start to see ourselves in a new, healthier light, no longer defined by others but by our own standards and values. The philosopher's words are a reminder that seeking approval is often an endless pursuit. The more we crave recognition from others, the more we mold ourselves to meet their expectations, and the more disconnected we become from who we really are. By discarding other people's tasks, we create space for a life driven by our own passions, beliefs, and purpose. We become the authors of our lives, not merely characters shaped by others' scripts. So, Adler's lesson on this third night is both empowering and challenging. It's an invitation to let go of the need to be everything for everyone and to find courage in being true to ourselves, even if that means being disliked. The reward for this courage, however, is immense, a life rooted in authenticity, self-respect, and, ultimately, a deeper and more fulfilling happiness. One of the core messages of the courage to be disliked lies in understanding and practicing the separation of tasks. This Adlerian concept revolves around a simple yet powerful question: whose task is this? By asking ourselves this, we can begin to identify what responsibilities truly belong to us and what responsibilities are others to carry. It's a mental shift that allows us to gain clarity, emotional freedom, and the strength to let go of burdens that don't serve our growth. Consider the book story of the child who is struggling with studying. The parents see their child's difficulty and naturally want to help. They might feel it's their task to ensure he succeeds, which leads them to step in, offer reminders, and even do parts of the work for him. But, in Adler's view, studying is actually the child's task, it's his responsibility, and he's the one who benefits from the learning and personal growth that comes from doing his own work. When the parents take on the task of studying for him, they aren't helping him. Instead, they're removing an opportunity for him to develop independence and self-reliance. This doesn't mean the parents can't support him. They can offer encouragement, help create a supportive study environment, and let him know they're there to answer questions if he needs it. But ultimately, they have to let him tackle his task on his own. By doing so, they allow him to take ownership of his learning journey and experience the satisfaction of overcoming challenges himself. Adler's philosophy teaches that when we blur the lines between our tasks and others, when we take on someone else's responsibilities or allow others to take over ours, we compromise our own happiness and disrupt theirs. We can't grow if we're constantly relying on others to carry our load, and others can't grow if we keep stepping in to carry theirs. This principle becomes even more relevant in close relationships, like those with family or close friends. In these intimate bonds, it's easy to feel responsible for each other's happiness or to intervene in each other's challenges. But if we want to achieve true happiness, Adler advises that we separate our tasks from theirs. This means allowing each person to experience, learn from, and address their own struggles, even if that means we sometimes have to watch them grapple with difficulty. In our own lives, recognizing the separation of tasks empowers us to focus on what we can control, our actions, our reactions, and our choices. It reminds us that we are the only ones who can bring about change in our lives, and that we are not responsible for changing others. Just as no one else can truly change us, we can't force transformation on others. Each of us has the right to walk our own path and to make choices that feel true to us. The separation of tasks is, at its heart, about trust, trusting ourselves to handle our own responsibilities and trusting others to handle theirs. By practicing this, we cultivate mutual respect in relationships and give each person the space to grow, learn, and create their own happiness. It's an act of compassion, because rather than controlling others, we are empowering them to discover their own strengths. Adler's message is clear: to live a happy life and help others find happiness, we must learn to set boundaries around our responsibilities. We must let go of the need to control, protect, or take over tasks that belong to others. In doing so, we not only allow others the freedom to live authentically but also liberate ourselves to pursue a life aligned with our true selves. This separation is the foundation of genuine happiness, personal empowerment, and respectful relationships. In the fourth night of the courage to be disliked, the conversation turns to a deeply human fear: loneliness. When we embrace the philosophy of the separation of tasks, we recognize that we alone are responsible for our own happiness and that only we have the power to change our lives. But for many, this realization can feel isolating. The young man grapples with this feeling, wondering if pursuing such an independent path means he's destined to face life alone, separated from others. Here, the philosopher introduces a critical insight: understanding the interconnectedness of the mind and body as one unified whole. Adlerian psychology suggests that we are not separate entities, mind and body, or self and others. Just as different parts of our body affect one another, our relationships and interactions with others deeply impact us. This is why Adler sees all problems as stemming from interpersonal relationships. No one exists in isolation. We are shaped by our interactions and our roles within society. The separation of tasks is not meant to disconnect us from others but to help us discern what we can control and what we can't, and to create healthier boundaries within our relationships. By understanding this concept, we can engage in relationships from a place of authenticity rather than dependency. We no longer base our self-worth on external validation, nor do we impose our expectations onto others. Instead, we allow each person the freedom to live their own life. The philosopher uses this conversation to emphasize that the world doesn't revolve around any single person. While we each play the central role in our own lives, we are also part of a vast and interconnected world. The idea isn't to isolate ourselves but to find our place within a larger community where every individual's contributions matter. Adler's philosophy teaches us to shift our focus from seeking validation to contributing meaningfully. In this way, we build connections not based on dependence but on shared purpose and respect. This is where Adler's perspective on interpersonal relationships shines. When we realize that others are not there to complete us, nor are we there to fulfill their lives, we can engage with people from a place of genuine connection rather than obligation. This outlook can alleviate the sense of loneliness because it redefines relationships as mutual exchanges rather than sources of validation. We feel a sense of belonging not because others complete us but because we each play a role in contributing to one another's journeys. The fourth night, then, is about reframing loneliness as a misunderstanding of one's role in the world. We're not alone, we're just individually responsible within a shared space. By honoring the separation of tasks, we build more honest and supportive relationships, knowing that we're each on our own path yet intrinsically connected. This understanding allows us to approach life not from a place of dependency or loneliness, but from a place of inner strength and interconnectedness. In The Courage to be Disliked, the concept of community stands as one of the most transformative and powerful elements of Adlerian psychology. Adler suggests that the essence of true happiness isn't found in self-centered pursuits or in isolating ourselves in the pursuit of individual success, but rather in recognizing that we are deeply connected to the community around us. This sense of belonging isn't something that is automatically bestowed upon us at birth, it's something we must create and nurture ourselves. It's an active process, one that demands effort, self-awareness, and a willingness to think beyond our own immediate needs and desires. The philosopher in the book explains that belonging comes not from being included by others, but from actively choosing to participate in the world around us in a meaningful way. True fulfillment is not found in the validation or approval of others but in the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing we are contributing to something larger than ourselves. Whether it's our family, our work, our local community, or even the broader world, our ability to find happiness is deeply rooted in how we engage with and contribute to these spaces. To Adler, the ultimate goal is to think beyond our individual existence and realize that we are part of a much larger tapestry, the world, the universe, and the intricate web of relationships that sustain us. The journey to true happiness comes from understanding that we are not isolated beings fighting for our own survival, but interconnected with everyone around us. This realization allows us to shift the focus away from constantly seeking validation or attention for ourselves and instead, redirect our energy toward being of service to others. When we begin to think, how can I help? How can I contribute? How can I be of use to the people and causes I care about? We move from a place of self-centeredness to a place of purpose and connection. This shift in mindset has profound effects on our relationships and our personal growth. As we focus on how we can serve others, whether in small ways through everyday acts of kindness or in larger ways through the work we do in the world, we find that our relationships deepen and become more meaningful. We begin to move away from the unhealthy desire for constant praise or recognition, and instead, embrace the quiet joy of knowing that our lives are enriching the lives of others. This is where true contentment lies, in the recognition that we are not here just for ourselves, but to play a part in the greater story of human connection and collective progress. Adler's philosophy challenges us to think about what it truly means to belong. Many people believe that belonging comes from being accepted into a group or being recognized by others. But Adler flips this notion on its head. True belonging, he argues, is not something that is given to us by others, it is something we create through our own actions. It's the result of our active participation in the lives of those around us. It's a commitment to not only connect with others but to invest in the relationships and communities we are a part of. When we invest in these relationships, we are contributing to something that is far larger than ourselves, something that gives our lives a sense of meaning and purpose that cannot be found in individual pursuits. In the book, the philosopher suggests that we must ask ourselves a powerful question: what can I give to this world? This question shifts the focus from what can I get to how can I serve? And it's this shift that helps us build a deeper sense of belonging. When we offer something of value to others, whether it's love, support, compassion, or just our time, we not only strengthen the bonds we share with those around us, but we also reinforce our own sense of worth and purpose. We realize that we are not alone in the world, we are part of a vast network of people, each contributing in their own unique way. The philosopher also emphasizes that community isn't just about the people immediately around us. It's about recognizing our place in the world at large and seeing our actions as part of a much greater story. Adler's view is that by contributing to the good of the world, we find our place in it. When we recognize that we are part of a larger, interconnected whole, we no longer feel like isolated individuals. Instead, we feel like active participants in the ongoing process of life, constantly contributing, growing, and evolving as part of the larger human experience. This realization, this recognition that we are part of a bigger picture, can be immensely empowering. It helps us see that our lives are not insignificant. We are part of a community that is constantly shaping and being shaped by our actions. In this way, we find happiness not by trying to achieve everything for ourselves, but by working together with others to build something meaningful and lasting. Adler's idea of community also has a profound effect on how we view our personal struggles and challenges. When we understand that our happiness is tied to our relationships and contributions, we begin to see problems as opportunities for growth. Instead of isolating ourselves in times of difficulty, we reach out to our community for support, and we offer our own support in return. We no longer feel like victims of our circumstances. Instead, we feel like active participants in shaping our lives and the world around us. In this sense, the idea of community becomes a key ingredient in our happiness. When we realize that we are not alone in our struggles, that we have the power to contribute to the well-being of others, and that we are part of a larger story, we find a deep sense of purpose and connection. This is where true belonging is found, not in seeking approval from others, but in recognizing that we have something meaningful to contribute to the world. When we live our lives with this sense of purpose, we build the kind of community that allows us to thrive, together. In the final night of the courage to be disliked, the philosopher delves into one of the most profound and challenging tenets of Adlerian psychology: one must not praise, and one must not rebuke. This concept is undeniably tough to swallow at first, especially in a world where praise is often seen as a fundamental part of building self-esteem, motivation, and healthy relationships. Yet, this section offers a strikingly empowering perspective on how to live authentically, in the present, and without the constant need for validation from others. The idea behind not offering praise or rebuke is rooted in the concept of equality and respect in relationships. Adlerian psychology suggests that when we praise others or ourselves, we're setting up a hierarchical system. It's as though we're saying, "You've done well enough to earn my approval," or "You've failed in some way and now you must be corrected." This creates an imbalance in relationships, subtly implying that the one offering praise or correction is superior. It becomes less about the genuine growth of the individual and more about navigating a social hierarchy where people are constantly striving to win approval or avoid criticism. The philosopher explains that the root of many interpersonal issues lies in this constant exchange of praise and rebuke. When people are constantly looking for praise, they are, in a sense, seeking validation to feel worthy. This pursuit of external validation can lead to anxiety, insecurity, and the unhealthy desire to please others. The same goes for when we rebuke or criticize others. The act of correction, especially when done excessively or harshly, can create feelings of inferiority, resentment, or shame. It disrupts genuine connection and creates tension where there could be understanding and collaboration. Instead, Adler encourages a shift in perspective, one where we interact with others from a place of mutual respect and equality. He urges that we focus on living in the here and now rather than getting caught in the game of approval and judgment. This means accepting people as they are, without the need to manipulate or control them through praise or correction. It's about understanding that every individual is responsible for their own growth, and our role is not to inflate their ego or tear them down, but simply to support them as they learn and grow in their own way. This shift in how we view praise and rebuke invites us to become more authentic and less concerned about the approval of others. By not constantly seeking validation or fearfully avoiding judgment, we free ourselves from the cycles of manipulation, expectation, and comparison that often define our relationships. We begin to live for ourselves, not in the sense of selfishness, but in the sense of being true to our own values, our own path, and our own sense of purpose. The true freedom comes when we stop seeking constant external approval and realize that our worth is not defined by the praise of others, nor is it diminished by their criticism. In practical terms, this means we can start to live in the moment. Instead of living in the past, where we rehash old mistakes and regret past actions, or living in the future, where we constantly worry about what others think of us and what might happen next, we begin to embrace the present. We acknowledge that all we have is right now. The real beauty of life is found in embracing each moment with sincerity, letting go of the need for validation, and focusing on how we can contribute, grow, and connect authentically. Living in earnest in the here and now allows us to fully engage with our lives. We are no longer focused on the judgment of others or caught up in the fear of making mistakes. Instead, we begin to see life as an opportunity to express our true selves, free from the constraints of external expectations. We are not defined by the accolades we receive or the criticisms we face. We are defined by the choices we make in the present, the relationships we nurture, and the contributions we offer to the world. The message here is ultimately about self-liberation. When we stop chasing after praise and approval, and when we stop fearing rebuke or judgment, we open ourselves up to the fullness of life. We can then experience relationships that are grounded in honesty, respect, and mutual support, rather than in manipulation or competition. By discarding the need for external validation, we find an inner peace that is unshakable, no longer dependent on the opinions of others. This concept also teaches us how to engage with others in a way that fosters their growth without imposing our expectations on them. By not praising or rebuking, we allow others the freedom to be themselves, to learn from their own mistakes, and to grow at their own pace. We support them, not by inflating their egos, but by treating them as equals, recognizing their autonomy, and offering our encouragement in the form of genuine respect, rather than empty validation. The courage to live without the need for praise or fear of rebuke is, in essence, the courage to be authentic. It's about embracing who we truly are, without the need to constantly perform for others. It's about stepping into the fullness of the present moment, where our worth is not measured by what others think, but by how true we remain to ourselves and the values we hold dear. When we live in earnest in the here and now, we free ourselves from the toxic cycles of seeking approval and avoiding criticism. We finally find the freedom to live for ourselves, and in doing so, we find true happiness and fulfillment. The title "The Courage to be Disliked" is not just a catchy phrase, it's a radical call to embrace a completely new way of interacting with the world and understanding our place within it. At its core, this concept challenges everything we've been conditioned to believe about relationships, self-worth, and the need for approval. The courage to be disliked means freeing yourself from the burden of seeking validation from others. It's about accepting that, sometimes, the people around you may not like you, and that's not only okay, it's liberating. The idea of not offering praise or rebuke is the foundation for this courage. When we let go of the need to constantly evaluate and judge others, either by elevating them through praise or lowering them through rebuke, we begin to shift our focus inward. We stop measuring ourselves against others and start measuring ourselves by our own values, our own choices, and our own growth. This is a revolutionary shift, one that fundamentally changes the way we engage with the world. It's a shift from living for others' approval to living for our own truth. Adler's philosophy teaches us that to truly live freely, we must learn to see others as equals. Whether they are our family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, we must stop seeing them as figures to be judged or manipulated into liking us. By redefining this hierarchy, no one above or below us, we unlock the true potential for growth and connection. Instead of constantly worrying about what others think, we focus on how we can contribute to their lives and how they can contribute to ours. This approach creates deeper, more authentic relationships based on respect, not based on a game of praise and rebuke. This concept of equality is what enables us to live without the constant fear of being disliked. Because, ultimately, being disliked is part of life. No one can please everyone. But in a world where we stop caring about being liked or disliked and focus more on being true to ourselves and our values, we begin to live authentically. We embrace the idea that our worth is not defined by the opinions of others, but by how we navigate our own lives, how we treat others, and how we contribute to the greater good. By internalizing this shift, we redefine our own identity. We stop relying on external sources of validation and start looking inward. This is where the real freedom lies. It's not about being indifferent to others or avoiding relationships, quite the opposite. It's about understanding that we are all equals, worthy of respect and love, but also recognizing that we don't need to change who we are to fit someone else's idea of who we should be. Alfred Adler's theories, whether we fully agree with them or not, provide a powerful framework for personal growth. He challenges us to rethink the way we relate to ourselves and others. The ideas and the courage to be disliked are not easy to digest, especially in a world where validation is often the currency of social interaction. But as the book shows, this shift in perspective, the courage to live without seeking praise or fearing rebuke, can lead to profound, lasting happiness. In my own experience, reading this book was an enlightening journey into understanding how much of our suffering stems from our need for validation and our fear of being rejected. Adler's philosophy has provided me with a new lens through which I see the world. I no longer have to constantly prove my worth or seek approval. Instead, I can simply be, live, and grow on my own terms, knowing that my true value lies within myself, not in the opinions or judgments of others. This philosophy is ultimately about empowerment. It's about taking control of your own narrative and refusing to let the expectations of others dictate your happiness. It's about having the courage to stand firm in your own identity, even if it means not everyone will like you. And when you find the courage to live authentically, free from the need for validation, that's when you begin to truly experience the freedom and joy that Adler describes. It's not an easy path, but it's a path that leads to the deepest sense of fulfillment. The courage to be disliked is not about rejecting others or living in isolation. Rather, it's about rejecting the need for others' approval and instead finding strength, purpose, and peace in living as your true self. And in that, you will find the real happiness that so many of us seek. These powerful quotes from Alfred Adler's The Courage to be Disliked encapsulate the essence of his philosophy, the belief that we hold the power to shape our lives and find happiness, not by avoiding discomfort or seeking external validation, but by having the courage to live authentically and take responsibility for our own emotional states. No experience is a cause of success or failure. This statement challenges the conventional notion that our past defines our future. Adler's philosophy suggests that experiences, whether positive or negative, are not inherently linked to our success or failure. It's not the experiences themselves that shape us, but rather how we interpret and respond to them. This idea empowers us to take control of our own lives, realizing that the meaning we assign to events, and not the events themselves, determine our progress and happiness. The courage to be happy also includes the courage to be disliked. Adler speaks here to the transformative power of authenticity. The courage to be disliked is essential to living a life true to oneself. In a world where approval and acceptance are often sought after, finding the courage to be yourself, without worrying about the opinions of others, liberates you. When you no longer live to please others, your relationships shift from burdens to lightness, because you are no longer carrying the weight of expectation. You become free to truly connect with others without fear of judgment or rejection. Your unhappiness cannot be blamed on your past or your environment. And it isn't that you lack competence. You just lack courage. One might say you are lacking in the courage to be happy. This quote strikes at the heart of Adler's teachings. Unhappiness is not the result of external circumstances, but rather the result of an internal lack of courage. Many people remain stuck in unhappiness because they have not yet summoned the courage to break free from their limiting beliefs and fears. Adler invites us to shift our mindset, understanding that we have the power to choose how we respond to life's challenges. Happiness, he suggests, is not something given to us, but something we choose to embrace through bold decisions. Do not live to satisfy the expectations of others. This is a call to step away from the constant pressure to conform or seek approval from others. When we live for the sake of meeting others' expectations, we lose touch with our true desires and values. The more we seek approval, the more we lose ourselves in a world of external demands. Adler encourages us to live for ourselves, to pursue our own happiness, and to make decisions based on what feels right to us, not what others think is right for us. In doing so, we reclaim our sense of self-worth and authenticity. No experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead we make out of them whatever suits our purposes. We are not determined by our experiences, but the meaning we give them is self-determining. Once again, Adler emphasizes the role of our own perspective in shaping our lives. Trauma, while real and painful, does not define us unless we allow it to. We are not victims of our past, but active participants in how we choose to interpret and learn from our experiences. This philosophy encourages us to look at life's challenges as opportunities for growth rather than sources of suffering. By reframing our experiences and giving them meaning that serves us, we become empowered to move forward and create the life we desire. In essence, these quotes call us to take responsibility for our own happiness, to let go of the need for external validation, and to embrace the courage to live freely and authentically. Adler's message is clear: we are not defined by our past, nor by the opinions of others. We have the power to choose how we respond to life's events, and in doing so, we can create a life of true fulfillment. The journey to happiness begins not with changing the world around us, but with changing the way we see and relate to the world, and most importantly, to ourselves. In Adlerian psychology, one of the most powerful ideas is that the world we see is shaped not by external circumstances or past experiences, but by our current mindset and goals. The world may seem complicated, mysterious, or overwhelming, but Adler argues that the real challenge is not how the world is, it's how we perceive and engage with it. If we change how we approach life, if we change ourselves, the world can appear simpler and more manageable. The shift from causes to goals. Adlerian psychology asks us to focus not on the past causes of our behavior, but on the present goals that we are unconsciously or consciously striving to achieve. It's about understanding that the meaning we create from our experiences is often driven by the goals we set for ourselves, goals that are not always conscious but are powerful in directing our behavior. This shift in perspective allows us to realize that we can take control of our present, instead of being victims of the past. For instance, let's look at your friend's situation. He's insecure and struggles with anxiety about leaving the house. It's easy to think that the anxiety and fear are the causes of his behavior. After all, fear and anxiety are often seen as the triggers for avoidance. But Adlerian psychology flips this idea on its head. It suggests that your friend doesn't actually want to go out, and he's using the anxiety and fear as a way to avoid doing so. In other words, he has a goal of staying inside, and his anxiety is a tool he's using to help achieve that goal. This is where teleology, the study of purpose, comes in. Adler proposed that the actions we take and the emotions we feel are not caused by past trauma or external forces, but are actually purposeful. We create our own purpose or goals, and everything we do serves to fulfill those purposes. Even if those purposes are unconscious, they still shape our present behavior. Teleology versus etiology, the power of purpose over cause. In traditional psychology, etiology is the study of causation. It looks at the events or circumstances that caused a particular issue, such as past trauma or environmental factors. This approach tends to focus on finding the root cause of problems in order to resolve them. But Adler's concept of teleology shifts the focus away from the past and towards the future. Instead of asking, "What caused this problem?" Adler's psychology asks, "What purpose does this problem serve?" This is a key difference, and it has a profound impact on how we view and approach challenges in our lives. When we think about problems in terms of teleology, we realize that the problems we face, such as anxiety, fear, or avoidance, might not just be random or caused by something that happened to us in the past. Instead, they may be purposeful, even if unconsciously, in helping us fulfill certain goals. This might be as simple as protecting ourselves from discomfort or avoiding situations that make us feel vulnerable. For example, your friend's goal of avoiding going out might serve a larger goal of protecting his sense of safety, even though the way he's doing it, by creating anxiety, is not helpful in the long run. In Adlerian psychology, once we become aware of the goal behind our behavior, we can start to make conscious changes to move toward healthier, more fulfilling ways of achieving what we truly need. Empowerment through change. The key to Adler's philosophy is that we have the power to change our goals and the way we approach life. By shifting from a focus on past causes to present goals, we empower ourselves to take control of our behavior and emotions. We stop being passive victims of our past and instead become active participants in shaping our present and future. If your friend could shift his focus from seeing his anxiety as something that has been caused by his past experiences to recognizing it as something he's creating to avoid going out, he could begin to change the goal. Instead of seeing himself as a victim of his fears, he could choose a new goal, to be more open to stepping out of his comfort zone. By recognizing the purpose of his anxiety, he could start to challenge it, and work on taking small steps to change the pattern. This mindset shift applies to all of us. If we are struggling with any issue, whether it's a fear, an insecurity, or a habit, the first step is to ask, what goal am I trying to achieve with this behavior? Is it a healthy goal that aligns with the life I want to create? Or is it a pattern that has been holding me back, even if I didn't realize it? Adlerian psychology teaches us that the world does not have to remain a complicated, mysterious place. By changing our own goals and taking responsibility for the purposes we give to our experiences, we can simplify the world and make it more straightforward. This shift from focusing on causes to focusing on goals doesn't deny the reality of challenges or painful experiences, it simply puts us back in control, helping us see that we have the ability to change the way we relate to them and move forward in a more empowering way. By recognizing the purpose behind our actions and emotions, we can start to rewrite our own narratives, shift our goals, and take meaningful steps toward a life filled with purpose, happiness, and fulfillment. Adlerian psychology emphasizes the idea that focusing on causes and traumas from the past will not propel us forward. If we remain trapped in etiology, we become stuck, constantly searching for the origins of our issues, and never truly progressing. We are simply reacting to the past, instead of actively shaping our future. This approach resonates with a crucial question that lies at the heart of what it means to be human: how do we move forward? According to Freud, psychic wounds, or trauma, are often seen as the root causes of our unhappiness, shaping who we are and how we behave. While trauma undoubtedly has its impact, Adler takes a very different stance. It's not the trauma itself that determines our future, it's how we interpret it, what meaning we assign to it, and how we choose to respond. If we keep focusing on the pain of the past, we will never break free from it. We are not determined by our experiences, we are determined by the meaning we give to those experiences. The power to change lies in how we choose to interpret and reframe what has happened to us. As Adler famously said, no experience is in itself a cause of our success or failure. We do not suffer from the shock of our experiences, the so-called trauma, but instead, we make out of them whatever suits our purposes. This perspective is incredibly liberating. It tells us that we are not bound by the things that have happened to us. Instead, we are free to create the meaning and purpose we choose to attribute to those events. In other words, we determine our own lives based on the meaning we give our past experiences. Life is not something that is handed to us. It is something that we actively choose. This is where teleology, the study of purpose, becomes crucial. Every person is living in line with some goal, whether they are conscious of it or not. Our actions, our emotions, our responses to life, all serve some deeper goal, and once we understand the purpose behind them, we can shift the course of our lives in a new direction. Take anger, for example. According to Adlerian thought, anger is not inherently bad or destructive, it is simply a tool. It's something we can use to achieve a goal, and it can be used strategically, as needed. Anger can be triggered in certain situations, but it can also be turned off in an instant when a new goal arises. For instance, you might be angry in an argument, but the moment the phone rings, you can instantly stop being angry. Anger is not a permanent state, and it is not an uncontrollable emotion, it is a tool that serves a purpose. When we realize that our emotions are tools, we gain control over them. This is the essence of Adlerian psychology, the understanding that we are not victims of our past or of our emotions. We can choose how we respond, what goals we pursue, and the meaning we assign to every experience. By focusing on our current goals, instead of being bogged down by past trauma, we begin to make progress in our lives. We begin to live in a way that is self-determined and purposeful. To move forward, we need to detach from the past and focus on what we want to achieve now. Instead of blaming our unhappiness on external forces or events that happen to us, we can start asking ourselves, what is my goal? What meaning am I giving to this situation? How can I change my perspective and choose a different path? By shifting our focus from etiology to teleology, we take the reins of our lives back into our own hands. We can start to change our actions, our emotions, and our relationships, not by looking backward, but by setting new goals and creating a new meaning for our experiences. This empowers us to move forward, instead of staying stuck in the past. Adlerian psychology suggests that people are not driven by the causes of their past but by the goals they set for themselves in the present and future. This perspective challenges the conventional thinking that our current circumstances are the inevitable result of past events, traumas, or genetics. Rather, the meaning we assign to those experiences shapes our present and future. Socrates, for instance, didn't leave any written work himself. He relied on his disciples, like Plato, to record his ideas for future generations. This idea emphasizes that what we do with what we have is what truly matters, not the circumstances into which we were born. Adler's assertion, the important thing is not what one is born with but what use one makes of that equipment, echoes this sentiment. We often get caught up in the idea that we need to become someone else, someone with different talents, opportunities, or experiences. But Adler's message is clear: you already have everything you need to live a fulfilling life. It is not about comparing yourself to others or wishing for a different set of circumstances. It is about making the most of the equipment you have right now, your abilities, your experiences, and your potential. It's a call to take responsibility for your life and focus on what you can control. At some point in our lives, many of us choose unhappiness, not because we were born into difficult situations or unhappy circumstances, but because we decide that being unhappy serves some purpose. We hold on to discomfort, fear, or resentment because, on some level, we believe that being unhappy is good for us. Adlerian psychology challenges this mindset, encouraging us to have the courage to be happy, which is often a harder choice than it seems. Change, especially personal change, brings with it discomfort and anxiety. It forces us to confront the courage it takes to evolve and face the disappointment that can come with not changing immediately. This struggle is intrinsic to human development. However, Adler makes a powerful point: unhappiness is not the result of our circumstances, it is the result of our failure to summon the courage to be happy. It's not a lack of ability or competence that keeps us stuck in unhappiness, it's simply the lack of courage to make different choices. In essence, the courage to change and the courage to pursue happiness are deeply intertwined. Adler's theory brings us to an empowering realization: the past has no bearing on how you live today or in the future. The meaning you give to your past experiences does not dictate your future unless you choose to let it. Adler famously stated that no matter what has occurred in your life up to this point, it should have no bearing at all on how you live from now on. Your power lies in the here and now, in how you choose to interpret your experiences and what you decide to do with them moving forward. Loneliness, Adler points out, is not just the absence of other people, it is the deep sense of being excluded from them. This isolation comes not from physical absence, but from feeling disconnected from others, whether that's due to societal pressures, judgment, or internalized beliefs. We may have friends, family, and community around us, but still experience loneliness when we feel that we don't belong, or when we feel we are being judged. This feeling of exclusion is often tied to inferiority complexes, where we see ourselves as lacking or unworthy. People with inferiority complexes may say things like, A is the situation, so B cannot be done, as if they are powerless in the face of their circumstances. They imply that their inability to succeed is not due to their own actions or choices, but due to external factors that are beyond their control. But Adler teaches that true confidence does not need to boast or seek validation from others. If you truly believe in your own worth, you do not need to flaunt it or prove it to others. Boasting often comes from a deep-rooted fear that if you don't make your superiority known, no one will accept you for who you truly are. This is the fear of being rejected, which fuels the superiority complex, a desperate attempt to assert dominance because one does not feel secure in their own identity. This brings us to the competitive mindset that many people experience in interpersonal relationships. When competition becomes the core of our interactions, we turn everything into a zero-sum game, a race to be better than others. This competitive mindset creates anxiety, stress, and resentment because we begin to see others not as fellow human beings, but as threats to our success. Those who approach life from a competitive standpoint often struggle to find happiness, even if they achieve external success. To them, the world is a perilous place filled with enemies, and the focus is on defending oneself rather than connecting with others. This constant battle for superiority can prevent true happiness from ever being attained. In terms of work and success, Adler emphasizes that if your primary motivation is to satisfy other people's expectations, your work will become a heavy burden. When your actions are driven by fear of judgment or the desire for validation, you repress your true self, your I-ness. In such a mindset, the work itself becomes a performance. You are not doing it for your own growth or fulfillment, but to please others. Living for the approval of others ultimately leaves you feeling unfulfilled because you are not living authentically. This is especially true when it comes to parent-child relationships. Adler suggests that parents often impose their own goals onto their children, believing it is for the child's own good. However, children can sense when these actions are not genuinely in their best interest but are instead motivated by the parent's need for control, status, or social expectations. This creates resentment and rebellion because the child realizes that their parents are not respecting their autonomy or personal goals. The key to avoiding this kind of conflict is understanding whose task it is. In other words, we must distinguish between what belongs to us and what belongs to others. If you want to help someone, ask yourself, who ultimately bears the responsibility for the outcome of this decision? Adler suggests that in counseling or parenting, the task is not to take over the other person's task but to assist them in figuring it out for themselves. For instance, if your child shuts themselves in their room, your first reaction might be to intervene and solve the problem for them. But Adler's approach would be to let it be their task to work through. Instead of hovering, the parent should offer their support but not intrude. This gives the child the space and freedom to confront their own challenges and come to their own conclusions. Over time, the child will likely reach out for help when they are ready, but this empowers them to take ownership of their actions and decisions. Ultimately, Adlerian psychology teaches that by separating tasks, by respecting other people's responsibilities and focusing on our own, we can avoid unnecessary conflict and create healthier, more supportive relationships. This simple yet profound shift in perspective can change not only how we relate to others, but how we relate to ourselves, allowing us to lead more purposeful, courageous, and fulfilling lives.